Hi Griffin, thank you so much for submitting your revision to your informational piece. No worries on it being late. I get that there's glitches in the system. That's totally fine. Today I want to focus on the same goals as before, which is really your organization and structure, but not necessarily in the sentences that we focused on last time, but rather in using a multimodal platform for your piece. So I know before we talked about taking out some sentences that were needed to really condense your piece of writing, because when you are referring to cooking, you want the sentences to be short and sweet. You don't want to elaborate too much or drag on. It's all about using the correct words. So you can read over the comments for some suggestions for grammar and spelling, and we are going to focus on the multimodal platform that I recommended before, which is Adobe Spark. So to show you what I mean by how it can really enhance your recipe for the reader, I'm going to show you my own informational writing piece. So I chose to do pumpkin spice muffins, and like your recipe, I started out with just typing it up, and I had one or two pictures on the page. So then I decided to use a slideshow to really break it down step by step, and that way I'm able to include pictures for the reader in case that might help clarify if they're, for instance, if they're new to baking. So I have the title of my recipe here, which is pumpkin spice muffins, and a picture of the finished product, just like you have in your informational piece. And then on the second slide, I listed all of my ingredients in the order that they are used, just like you did in your piece, which is great. And I have little asterisks on the first two ingredients, and then down here on sugar, and we will talk about what that means later. So after that, there is an optional cinnamon sugar topping, which I did choose not to do, but that will also be noted later in the recipe. And then I have the ingredients for how to make that. And then I completely separate the instructions by making just one single slide saying the instructions, so that there is a clear difference that I am done with the ingredients and going on to the actual process of baking. So I list my steps. So step one from the writing, so on your piece, your step one is to combine the garlic, ginger, chilies, 1 teaspoon lime, lemon juice, etc. And my step one was preheat the oven to 375 degrees and then line a muffin pan with the cupcake liners. So I directly transferred the step one in the written paper piece and put it into a slide, and then I put a picture of what that step looks like next to it. And I just continued this for the whole recipe. So for your step two, you have heat the oil in a large saucepan on medium-high heat, and then add in the onion and the baking soda and cook it until it's caramelized. So what you could do for that is take that step two and put it into part of a slide, and then incorporate a picture of what it looks like. Now, if you don't have any pictures of this dish, you can Google the steps on Google and just do images to refine your search. So let's see, this is called Chana Masala. So if I go to that and I type in images, then you can see all of the pictures, and you can see the different steps of what it looks like. So that's just a thought to consider, is taking some pictures from Google if you are not actually going to make the recipe for your piece. And then I go on to the next step. which was combining the flour with the wet ingredients, mixing it up, and finally putting it in the muffin pans. And again, I have pictures. So then that's about it for the pictures. So the last part of your multimodal video would just be the remainder of your recipe. So in your instance, there's no baking, but there is simmering for 30 minutes. So your slide right after the pictures would look just like this, only it would say that you need to simmer the ingredients for 30 minutes. And then what I meant before when I said to include any personal tips that you have from your experience with the recipe is recipe notes. So in mine, I had the extras that we saw in the first slide of the ingredients, and this is just what correlates with those down here. So for all-purpose flour, another option is to do unbleached flour. For white sugar, another option is unrefined cane sugar. And again, the cinnamon sugar topping is optional. And then my personal adaptation to this recipe is adding in chocolate chips, which you can do your standard chocolate chips or your white chocolate chips. It is up to you. There are other options that you can do. Like I know some people add in bananas, some people might add in some walnuts. It's really up to you. You can adapt any recipe to your liking, but when you're doing an informational text, you want to make sure to write that down. And then since I did get this from a source, I made sure to write down where I got the source from. So for your piece, that might be something to consider in general, because right now this looks like a recipe that you yourself came up with. And based on what you say in the beginning about it being one of the most popular dishes in India and Pakistan, to me as a reader, that tells me that you did not write it. So I would just write where this recipe was adapted from, so that the reader knows that it is not your personal creation. And then again, just if you use pictures and you did not take them, make sure you write where you got them from. So in your case, you could write pictures taken from Google Images. So that's just a thought. You can really see how using a multimodal platform just really breaks it down step by step. It makes it easier to follow. It's important to keep your reader in mind that looking at a whole page like this might be overwhelming to reader, and even though it's a recipe with specific steps, they might not know where to start. They might get distracted, have to keep reading the same step over and over again, etc. So you just have to keep all of the possibilities that could happen for the reader in mind. So for next week, for your revision and editing, I would really like you to try out a multimodal platform. Adobe Spark is great because it has a lot of options on it. So I chose to do a slideshow, but if you go to Adobe Spark, you will see that there are several different options. So you can do graphics, which you can do ads, you can do a Facebook post, a story, a flyer, a poster. You can make a photo journal as a web page for your recipe, which is very similar to the video that I did. And then under here, the videos is the slideshow, which is what I did. And there's also a explaining video and a promotion video, or a video that you can completely personalize. So that is what I want you to do for next week, is pick one thing from here to put your recipe into. So even if it's just a poster, take that poster and enter all of your recipe information and just see how it really changes your recipe and makes it easier and more appealing to the reader. Overall, I think that the changes that you made from last week were great. You definitely made it easier to read and easier to understand, and I can't wait to see what you create for next week.